Hey everybody, welcome to Truth About Design, where we talk about candid truths and guidance for the design industry. And in this video, we are going to talk about simple ways to get clients and stakeholders to approve your designs. Now, designers love making fun of bad clients and stakeholders. And true, there are definitely some very unreasonable, disrespectful people out there, especially in those first 2 years of your career where you're just starting out and you're working with businesses that have very small budgets and no exposure to what it's like to work with designers. But as a professional, it's your job to take responsibility for your part in managing a client relationship. And the better you are at managing clients, the less problems you'll have, even with the more unreasonable clients. So why do designers struggle with this? Well, a lot of designers, they just don't want to deal with the people part. They just want to show off their work and have it be signed off on. Most creative people, designers and engineers, communicate through their work and not with their words. But unfortunately, that's not how the rest of the world works. Most people in the world communicate with words. For many people, words are the only output they have in their profession. The output of their job is, getting everyone aligned in a meeting or getting something pushed through. So if you want to reach those people whose main output in work is words, you need to learn to speak their language. Now, when I was younger, I dismissed those managers and clients that spend most of their time at work talking. I dismissed them as people that aren't doing real work. Us designers and engineers, we were doing the real work. They weren't doing anything. Why are they keep getting paid so much? And why do they keep getting put into leadership positions? Now, whenever I remember that time in my life, I feel ashamed to think that I was ever that foolish. Everything we've created as a human species in the last 10,000 years was built on words. An essay pinned to a door disrupted the Catholic Church, Martin Luther's 95 Theses. Have you ever read a book that moved you emotionally? Words are one of the most powerful tools humans have to build consensus and connect with others. So communicating well and being able to bring others along in your design process, that's the difference between a mediocre designer making $30 an hour and a design leader making as much as he or she desires to charge. Okay, so how do you do it? Getting clients to listen to your feedback and to go with your design recommendations, it starts a long time before you show them any wireframes or mock-ups. Most lay people, they still associate visual design, that the pretty part at the end, with design as a whole. But the best designers, they push visual design out for as long as possible, and they get agreement on everything else first. So if you're in a client engagement, as you take them through the UX process, you want to make sure that you hold back that visual design for a long time and you build up a storehouse of agreements and trust. So what does that mean, a storehouse of agreements and trust? Well, after you've done your research, and you have a good idea of who you're designing for, you take those research insights, you formulate a set of goals and desired outcomes, and then you take that to your client and see if you are on the same page. If you are on the same page, you've got your first agreement that you've worked out together. Make sure you get it in writing. Now, if you want to go the extra mile, when you're working through that research and you're creating the customer personas, involve the client deeply in the process of creating those personas. Do a persona workshop where you're working with them together. And once you've created those personas together, now you've got your second agreement. See, if stakeholders have put their own time and energy into some of the early design work alongside you, they are much more likely to be an advocate of yours than if you're just trying to play superstar designer and present your awesome finished results to them. By the way, that superstar designer approach, that only works if you already have reputation as a superstar. And yeah, sure, if you're like Paul Rand or Michael Bierut, then a lot of times there will be situations where you can just hand someone your work and they will just sign off on it, no problem. But even Michael Bierut has, I watched a video of his where he was talking about his redesign of Saks Fifth Avenue, And he definitely did not walk in there and could just sort of have everyone applaud and sign off on his design without any pushback. Also, these so-called superstar designers, they tend to be the most humble and grateful people because they had to slug their way through tough client engagements just like everyone else. So anyway, after just that was just an aside. After the research phase, the design process varies depending on the complexity of the project. But say, for example, you're doing a user flow or customer journey next. Well, you create that user flow or that customer journey, you sit down with the client and see if you're on the same page with that journey. And if you find that you are on the same page, you've got agreement number 3. You see where this is going, right? So as you start creating low and medium fidelity wireframes, you have an opportunity to rapidly iterate together with the client and build up a storehouse of micro agreements. Every time you show them a wireframe and you discuss it with them and you make adjustments to it, you build they'll agree on one part of the wireframe, but not on the other, and then you make adjustments, and eventually you reach a set of things that you agree on. And this series of interactions and agreements over time, it builds trust and it builds familiarity. And this is extremely powerful because people are more likely to say yes to you again after they've said yes to you in the past. It's also useful because if the client decides to change their mind later on, you can refer back to that long list of things you agreed on over the course of the project. So all of this work that you've done so far is just building up to the moment of truth, which comes when you reach the visual design phase. When you introduce colors, shapes, and images, people's emotions get activated. And any type of logic just flies out of the window as soon as you introduce these emotionally charged elements into your design work. This is the point at which that storehouse of agreements, that bank that you've paid into with things that the client agreed on, and all that trust you've built, that becomes critically important to keep the project from derailing. So for example, say you show off a visual design to a client that doesn't fit their personal taste. They don't like that red. They think that color looks weird. They think that photo isn't right. It doesn't fit their personal taste. And now you can tell them, you know what? I agree. I'm not a huge fan of that color scheme personally as well. But hey, do you remember those personas that we created together? Well, based on what we know about these people we're trying to target with this design, we can be reasonably confident that this color scheme will resonate with that audience, which will lead to the outcomes that you're trying to get for your business. So you're removing emotions out of the equation, you're reminding them of what you've worked on in the past, and you're also agreeing with them that, you know what, I don't like it personally either, but this will work for the goals we're trying to achieve. And in my experience, this approach of building agreement early on and involving the client in the process rather than just presenting results, that works at least 80% of the time. And it works particularly well as the clients you work with become larger. Yeah, sure, a one-person startup with delusions of grandeur, they may ignore any logic you throw at them. But larger companies tend to respond very well to data and reason. Another thing you want to do is assume positive intent. See, when I was younger, I had thinner skin and a more fragile ego, and my sense of self-worth was tied closely to the design work I was doing. So if a client didn't really get what I was doing, I saw it as a personal attack. And I see this behavior in a lot of designers. It's another one of those things where I look back at myself and I'm just thinking, I can't believe I was ever that immature. See, you need to assume positive intent when you're dealing with clients. Most people are nice and relatively reasonable if you approach them the right way. And the truth is, clients are nervous too. When you show clients your work, they are often insecure because they don't know how to talk about it. They don't have the vocabulary to articulate what they like and don't like about it. So in the absence of that, they resort to the handful of phrases they've picked up, like drop down and 3-click rule. And in the process of doing that, they sound awkward and possibly even a bit unsmart to someone who is native in that language. But remember, everyone is a beginner at something. If you go to Russia and try to speak to a native Russian after taking Duolingo after taking Russian on your Duolingo app for 2 weeks. Imagine how you'd sound to them. So when you show clients your work, yes, they are often insecure because they don't know how to talk about it. So it's your job to be gracious and compassionate with them. And look, I know that not every client is great. There are some terribly obnoxious, unreasonable, overly dramatic, borderline narcissistic people out there. And if you're working in a bigger city, there will be a lot of those people. I've encountered more people like that in my 6 years in Silicon Valley than I encountered in 30 years of living in Germany. But still, even in places like that where there's a higher concentration of bad people like that, most people are nice. So you need to assume positive intent. And if you're dealing with that minority of people who are narcissistic, unreasonable, and don't respect you, your best bet is to push back against that. First, do it polite and indirect, then do it polite and direct. And if that doesn't work, leave. Fire them as a client. Eric Spiekermann, the designer, he says that we don't work with arseholes. And that's a spot-on philosophy to live by. The pain those people cause is not worth any amount of money they pay you. And actually, most of the time, those types of people are stingy on top of being really tough to work with. Share your story with me. I would love to hear your most frustrating client stories. If you have any questions, send them over to info@truthaboutdesign.com. And if you want more content like this, head over to truthaboutdesign.com, and I look forward to hearing from you again soon.